Hello, and welcome to another episode of the program, Candid Talk with Zainab Suleiman Okino, coming to you on Trust TV. Politics is in the air, so it is understandable that we give a little more of attention to the issue. Today on the program, we'll be talking about Naira reign in the political space. To discuss this topic with me is Dr. Hussein Abdul. Dr. Hussein Abdul is the country director of CARE International. He became CARE International country director after serving as the country director of Plan International. He was also in the academia and once taught at the Nigerian Defense Academy, but has remained in the civil society space for quite some years now. Dr. Abdul, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the discussion proper, let's go on a short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, the program is Candid Talk with Zainab Suleiman Okino on Trust TV, Abuja. And our focus today is on Naira reign in Nigeria's political space. Our guest today is Dr. Hussein Abdul, the country director of CARE International. Dr. Abdul, thank you again for being here. Doctor, the political space is saturated with a lot of activities and plenty of money. How do you see this development? Where are we going to?
Yeah, I think that's indeed the right way to describe it. It's saturated, it's plenty of money, and it's therefore indeed Naira reign. Of course, not Naira reign for the people, for citizens, but largely Naira reign for the political parties. We've seen we're already in the nomination process. And the major parties, we know what they're already charging. Presidential for APC is about 100 million. That's huge, coming from 25 million in the past. For the opposition, the major opposition party, PDP, is about 40 million. 40 million. And that's still also a huge amount of money. And it's not just the quantum of what they're paying, but it's also about the number of people that are buying this form. It's unbelievable. But the challenge with this kind of thing is that it excludes because we're in a society that is deeply unequal. Some are exceptionally rich and others are extremely poor. And the majority of the people are actually poor. So when you restrict politics or participation at the highest level to people who actually have the resources, it becomes a problem. The challenge with the liberal democracy, and particularly the variant that we are implementing in our parts of the world, is a tendency to lead you to what political scientists describe as plutocracy, which is the rule by the rich. Because at the end of the day, you have deeply impoverished people. And so for you, the political electoral mobilization or electioneering is largely around sharing cash in the immediate and using that to procure vote. Unfortunately. Because of the level of inequality even in our own system, at the end of the day, what percolates, what goes down to even poor people who actually vote, it's not even anything significant. The sharing is actually at the level of that top, at that strategic level, who probably claim to own or control certain voting population, and they become more like the interlocutors with communities, and they are the one that goes up with some of those things. And that's why sometimes I feel that the whole conversation on vote buying is deeply misconstrued, it's not properly explained, it's not understood, because we see people frowning at the 1,000, 2,000 that goes to the poor, as bad as it is.
Yeah.
But the ones that the huge chunks, the millions and billions that goes to the ones on top, we don't see it and we don't even discuss it at all.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so with this number of people that have shown interest in APC and are paying 100 million naira down the line, 50 million naira for governors,
Yeah.
senators,
Yeah.
House of Reps, I think in the end they may be able to raise up to 30 billion naira.
Yeah.
Are we not institutionalizing corruption, even with PDP's 40 million, which is high enough? Where do we go from here as far as fighting corruption is concerned?
Yeah, we're surely institutionalizing corruption because, like I tell people, the bulk of the resources that they're actually using to buy these nomination forms are actually coming from the public.
Indirectly.
Indirectly, because if you check the history of the people who are actually procuring this form, are people who have been active in the public sector.
Over the years.
Over the years. And therefore, they made these resources from the public.
From us.
From us. And then they are giving it to the political party to sustain their continuous control of that public space.
Or to rig, who knows?
No, yeah, because if it's for them to control the space, because at the end of the day, you become desperate because of what you have put in. And therefore, you will do anything to remain in power. And that will include rigging. It may include doing anything to actually remain in power. And then when you remain in power, you will have to recoup what you have invested. So therefore, procuring form has become more like buying shares. You know, it's like buying shares.
So it's now transactional.
It's transactional. So you are buying shares, party shares, with the expectation that you will reap dividends when you get elected. But don't get me wrong. Generally, electoral democracy has some element of gratification. It's either delayed gratification or immediate gratification. There is something you always expect, but it does not necessarily always come in terms of this transactional cash kind of thing. So people look, it's either you are supporting the party because you may get contract when they win the election, or you can be appointed a minister. Or, there's always something. That's the delayed part of it.
Okay.
Most time, the people who get the delayed gratifications are those who are very active in the party hierarchy. Yes. Those who have been excluded, and because of those years of exclusion, they have lost confidence in the system. They demand for immediate gratification. What is in need for me? So if they want them to go and vote, then you have to give them something to go and vote, because they knew after voting for you, they will not see you again. They will never see you again. 4 years after. So that's the complexity. But this is going to entrench, is going to deepen, and like you said, institutionalize corruption, because it has created that kind of vicious circle of corruption. You have to make the money so that you can get the nomination, and then you get the nomination, and then you have to get reap the dividend of your nomination from that public source. And it goes on in that circle. And unfortunately, you can't manage it. You can't control it. I actually listened to the chairman of APC when he tries to rationalize why they're charging that. And you can feel it. He didn't give a qualm. He was saying that this is even the cheapest they could see, but I think he was empirically and historically wrong, even by giving examples of other countries in terms of what they pay. That's not true. Nominations are not done in that way. Yes, in the course of electioneering, to reach, depending on the size of the country, you have to reach people, it can be expensive, but not that the cost of picking the form to run the election is what is that expensive. He was comparing this with even appointment of traditional rulers and how much you pay. But ultimately, what he was the major reason is to exclude people. That's what he said, is to exclude. We don't want our party ticket to be cheap, so that every Dick and Harry can just come and pick our form, and then we run the process and they start going to court. And that they can be used to go to court to truncate the party processes. So basically what he's saying is to exclude. But unfortunately, for him as well, it didn't. It's just that it didn't stop the number of people that we are seeing buying, because this is unprecedented.
Yes.
or 25 people buying a party nomination form, you know, it's unprecedented. So even though the price is so high, but we have had more number of people buying nomination forms. And the embarrassing part is the number of people who are currently in the public sector, from National Assembly members, like the Senate President, through to ministers, you know, and from the stories we're hearing around the central bank governor and all that. So for me, it's just very easy and simple to conclude that this money is taken directly. And then you also try to insult the public by actually saying that some people contribute, some of your friends or group put resources together to buy the form for you. It just doesn't work, and I think we need to take a strong action on this. But our legislative process is not even helping that. Like the new Electoral Act, part of the major limitation of it even increased the amount of money you can spend in electioneering instead of reducing it.
Well, even that does not make, because most of the things we do are in the closets.
Yes.
So you cannot trace or track.
No, you actually, well, this is one of the major limitations of mine. INEC doesn't have the capacity
to trace and
track that. They cannot monitor parties and political candidate expenditure. We don't have the capacity.
Well, maybe that's a topic for another day.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, with this liquidity level of the politicians, how do you juxtapose their own liquidity level with the hard time and the liquidity level of the economy?
Yeah, I think it's a major contradiction. But again, we also have to accept the fact that it is a deeply unequal country. The extent of lack is not equal across all the spectrum of the class. Whereas some people are suffering extreme deprivation, others are wallowing in extreme accumulation. And therefore, where some cannot produce even 1,000, others are able to cough out 100 million even within an hour. And it's not good for the health of the society. Sometimes what we are going through in terms of our insecurity and all that, without rationalizing violence, actually has its root in the character of our economy and society. The level of inequality, the extent of exclusion of the majority from the economic and the social activities of the country. And this is what is creating what we have. But again, part of it is also that people are having unbelievable access to public resources. Unbelievable access to public. So the level of corruption is deepening. And for me, I think in the past 10 years, I hardly talk corruption the way we talk about it now. I prefer to refer to it as impunity. Because sometimes corruption presupposes that you are doing something, you know, hidden, you are hiding and you are doing it. But they don't hide it. Corruption is just naked on the streets. You see it everywhere. And nobody cares because it is their turn. That's the feeling.
And that takes me to another question that I'll ask when we go on break.
Yes.
So stay with us. We'll be going on break now. When we come back, we'll discuss how EFCC or ICPC can wade into this money rain in the economy and in the country anyway. Welcome back to Candid Talk with Zainab Suleiman Okino. And our focus is still the Naira reign in the Nigeria's political space. And the country director of CARE International, Dr. Hussein Abdul, who is our guest today, have been doing justice to the issue. Welcome back to the program. So before we went on break, I was asking questions relating to how the EFCC and ICPC, our corruption organs, our anti-corruption organs, how they can wade in, because this one is no longer about anybody reporting or somebody writing a petition. is now in the open. How can they wade in?
Yeah, I think they can wade in by actually looking at putting a searchlight on our politicians. But whether they can do it is, for me, the major question. But an easy way to look at this, you actually check bank transactions and easily check people's income profile. In other parts of the world, you, particularly in the Scandinavia, some countries in Europe, of course, America doesn't do that. But in those regions, you actually have to justify your living standard. So, meaning that you have to prove that you can afford what you are doing.
Or what you are using.
Or what you are using.
Where you live.
Or where you live. And so that actually have to do with your income and all that. And the state has a history of your income, because the history of your income is associated with your tax. So if you cough out 100 million and you give out 100 million, you actually have to prove to us the tax that you have been paying, because for you to give out 100 million, it must be in your account probably. Let me just say, assuming an individual bought that. So can we trace that to your tax history? How much have you been paying as your tax? And that will tell us whether you have been earning that and have been paying tax. And then if you say it was a contribution
from your friends,
we actually also have to show transaction history. You have to provide evidence of transaction history. How much did each of these friends contribute? From which bank account to what bank account?
Our own is informal.
No, because you can't, the APC is not collecting, and I'm just using APC as an example because they have the highest.
Yes.
There are many parties, and PDP is one of them, but they are not collecting cash. They're not taking cash. I think they take check or
transfer.
I think they're not taking transfer.
That's the way they do.
There's this bank order. There's what did they call it? I think there's this. So that's what they are taking. So for you, it means that for you to buy, you actually have to have a bank account. And so your bank account always have a history. And I think that if the EFCC is doing its job well, is to actually put a searchlight. Just put a flashlight on the history of those accounts. You can actually be able to prove whether it was a proper contribution by friends or well-wishers. You can also be able to determine whether it's the individual that is actually giving out the money. But both ways is traceable.
And that it should be traceable.
No, yeah, it is. It should be traceable as long as the transaction is not in cash. And I didn't see the party collecting money in Ghana must go, because if you have to bring out 100 million, you have to take it in multiple Ghana must go. And they're also not taking it in dollars. So because if we're taking it in dollars, you can say, okay, the dollar value of 100 million can be manageable in cash. So that's not what, but this is a challenge, because the whole act of, or process of fighting corruption actually has a political dimension, because the people in these two institutions, as much as they try and insist on their independence and whatever, they are public institutions that are managed and controlled by politicians.
Appointed by the government of the day.
Appointed by governments of the day. No matter how much they try to assert their independence, in our kind of society, there's limits to what they can do. So they are acting and watching the body language of their principal.
Wow.
Yes, they are acting and watching the body language of their principal. They don't actually need to be given instruction, do this and do that, but they just watch the trend. I want to believe that with that 100 million, if the president, for instance, says that 25 people have bought 100 million. We need to see how they got, where they got their money. They will swing into action.
They will swing into action.
They will swing into action and begin to investigate. But nobody said anything, and then it means it is comfortable, and it's fine. So I think they are hugely limited. And this is one of the challenge of institutional approach to the fight against corruption. Because Institutions are makings of the government of the day. In a society where institutions are not independent of the larger politics of the society, those institutions are, at the end of the day, they are captured. We call it capture, regulatory capture. So they capture those politicians, very influential people, they capture those regulatory institutions. And the regulatory institution ends up acting in the interest of those people rather than the interest of the society.
Public.
So for me, that's the challenge. I really think that as a people, we need to diversify this whole discourse or processes of fighting corruption. We need to create more awareness around citizens. We need to make citizens be able to ask the right questions about what people are doing with public resources. It does not make sense that you have a neighbor who probably had a small car and he went into politics, and 1 year later
He comes back with...
Exactly.
In fact, he will change his accommodation.
He changes, he leaves your neighborhood and moves to the next neighborhood, swallowing in riches.
It's what we call next level now.
Yeah, he's moved to the next, he's moved to the next level, and that person is actually celebrated. Nobody's asking questions.
That goes to our values.
It goes largely to our values. That we are not questioning some of those things. We end up celebrating them. We give them traditional titles. We give them awards, different kinds of awards, because they have stolen from us and have shared a peanut with us.
Oh, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So I think it's a lot that we need to do. We need to invest in public education. We need to create this kind of awareness. We need to promote values of accountability and transparency. And the people must be able to ask the right questions and actually use those questions to determine who they vote for.
So talking about how unfortunate our situation is, the Minister of, it's now ex-Minister of Transport.
Yes.
The government has
said... he resigned eventually?
Yeah, the government has said they will not pay ransom to kidnappers. Understandably so.
Yeah.
But the minister has taken this form, has bought this form for another 100 million,
Mm-hmm.
And these, our brothers and sisters, are still in the bush, whereas the kidnappers are asking for so much. How do you explain, how low can a country get? Don't they have conscience? These are our leaders.
I think so. I think they do. But the challenge is that we see, I used to be a Marxist. There is this feeling.
You're no longer a Marxist.
They said your material condition determines your consciousness.
Good.
So their material condition is not allowing them to see things the way we see them. So they are wearing different eyeglasses. And therefore, the image, what they are seeing, how they are seeing society, how they are expressing the contradiction is different from the way others are seeing it. So, whereas it's unfortunate that we still have Nigerian citizens and there are multiple in captivity and for over a month now, and we are not getting the required communication.
Attention, sir.
Attention from in other places where you have strong public accountability, we'll be getting daily update. Even if these people remain in captivity, but we will be getting updates. Public, we can have a place where aides of those major institutions will be addressing us and saying, today this is the latest, we have this. Or they could even come up and say, look, today we didn't get anything new. It's still the same thing as what we reported to you yesterday. And therefore, the media will be reporting that on a daily basis. And people will know that something is actually being done. But at the moment, you don't hear anything. Of course, we heard that even the Parliament was trying, or the National Assembly is trying to pass a law to probably prohibit paying ransom. The paying of ransom. Of course, that will only work in the formal realm. It wouldn't work in reality of the people. So when you do that, when people are under this kind of difficulty, and they see you playing, because it's just playing around with just millions of resources. It creates public anger and resentment. And this anger and resentment can be expressed in different ways. It can be individualistic and it can be collective. So somebody just go hit someone, collect money, go to kidnap another person, collect, or public go out to protest against it. So sometimes we don't do certain things because you don't know how public anger and resentment will be expressed. So you do things with that level of consciousness. But their material condition is not even allowing them to see that, because they have it, they are not lacking, they have access to it, and their condition is totally different from the condition of the majority of the people.
Okay, as someone who has been in the development circle over the years, you can easily explain how much of this money, how it can be used to improve our lives,
Yes.
to provide social amenities.
Yes.
Money that is now going to probably one basket.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. I have run international development agencies of different sizes, and I know what billions of naira can actually do. You can, at the maximum, with 2 million naira, you can have boreholes in community. We have communities in Abuja here that still drink from streams, and when it is dry season, they don't have water. Here in FCT.
So what in a nutshell, because time is, we're out of time.
When you invest 100 million in a community, you transform that community. You provide water, you can provide schools, and you can provide health facilities.
So in a nutshell, what do you think is the solution to this?
The solution to this is actually that we need to recognize it. There are two dimensions to it. One, we must put up an institutional framework and mechanisms for managing this kind of disgusting resource spent for elections. And this means that our law must protect us. Political parties must be clearly told that they cannot charge up a certain amount. Because look at it, you pay this to pick the ticket. But when you pick the ticket, they give your name to INEC. You don't pay a dime to INEC. to run the election. And INEC spend a huge billions or trillions of resources to actually run an election. But you're not paying anything to INEC. And you're paying this. Parties should go and raise their resources for their members. This is what our political parties have failed to do. And they are using nomination process to raise funds. Our parties are lazy. Our politicians want the easiest way to winning elections. And this is not working.
Doctor, maybe time is not on our side. So maybe some other time I'll call you to come and explain more on this. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, viewers, this is where we draw the curtains on today's episode of the program, Candid Talk with Zainab Suleiman Okino. Until we come your way next time, do enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye for now.